I'm live. Okay, I don't know if anyone's going to watch this live or not. But for those of you watching in the future, this is my first ever live stream. I'm always terrified to do these because I always assume like nobody's going to watch it live. But oh my God, there are 3 people here. So hi, I have no idea what I'm doing really with live streams. So I do plan on, hey, Martina. Yeah, I do plan on improving my live stream capabilities in the near future. Simon, how you doing, mate? Sabrina, hello. Oh my God. Okay, so at least someone's watching. So that's fantastic. That was always my biggest fear. So yeah, so I do a monthly Q&A. Hey, Jamal, good to see you. Elaine, oh my God, Hannah, this is so cool. Okay, Batul, okay, didn't expect this. This is awesome. Hey, Rama. Richard, what up? Okay, so we'll spend a few minutes hanging out. Hey, Brett. I really did not expect this. This is so cool. Yeah, we'll hang out for a few minutes, let people kind of come in. ND123, love it. Jag mår bra, tack, Batul. Hur mår du? Batul is writing in Swedish in the chat, which is great. Oh my God, Barbara. Hey, how you doing? Right, so yes, I do a monthly Q&A video for my Patreon supporters. But the cool thing is my Patreon community is growing quite a lot. And so I got a lot more questions submitted this time. And so I thought it would just be a cool opportunity to do my very first live stream and see if you guys enjoy it. Hey, Giovanni. Estoy muy bien. ¿Y tú? Danny. Hello. Good to see you, Simon. Just so you all know, Simon is a legend. Simon, I'm not sure if you mind me sharing any information about our history, Simon, but Simon was my golf instructor when I was a wee lad, and a great friend, great mentor, and I owe you a beer when I'm back in the UK. Привет! So yeah, like I said, we will be going through some questions that were submitted on Patreon today. I will also happily answer some questions from the community. Hey, Richard, good to hear that. Yeah, so happy to answer some questions if I can from the chat in between. The main focus I want to make sure I get to answer all the questions that were submitted on Patreon. This is so much fun. We should do more of this. We should do more of this. Language come up. How's it going? Oh my God, good to see you. And Aggie. Okay, so many lovely people. Yes, I do plan to learn a Slavic language in the future. Simon, you're always right. Always right. Yeah, I do. So I actually have learned some Russian in the past, and I would love to get back to that at some point. It's Slavic languages are definitely in my future. Yeah, no, I will definitely be getting back to Russian one day. I actually did a semester of Russian in college when I was first really starting to get into multiple languages. It was really fun, but then life happened, so I'll get back to it. Let's see. Yes, I am actually planning to learn British Sign Language. So the Language Made Lazy show asks if I'll ever learn sign language. Yes. I've been dying to learn a sign language for a long time, and I didn't know which one to learn. I had a feeling I may not be in the US forever, and I have some really exciting things I'm working on planning for the near future. So I'm going to be documenting learning my first sign language on this channel. Saludos, Simon. That beer might be coming sooner than you think. If I can just figure out how to get home, it's a bit of a complicated time. All right, so here it is 11:39 a.m. I didn't plan on doing a live stream. If I planned it sooner, I would have started a bit earlier. But yeah, as I was preparing for my video today, I realized live stream is probably a good idea, or I'll be editing for like 3 days. Hello, Tatiana. Mia! I love Mia. She leaves the most like awesome comments, and she's like gets everybody ready to like support, share, like. This is so much fun. I'm definitely doing more live streams. Okay, let's jump into our first question, and I will try to keep an eye on the chat. I feel like one of those people that does live streams and like has to watch the chat. Okay, let's see here. So the first question comes from Nicholas. Nicholas has been a wonderful supporter on Patreon, and he asks, how do you choose what languages to study, and how do you stay focused and motivated? And most importantly, how do you avoid temptation of other languages? Yeah, so choosing languages for me is it always starts with a deeply sort of intrinsic motivation. So, and sometimes it's quite interesting. Like many people have asked me, why in the world are you studying Swedish? In fact, no one is more surprised that I'm learning Swedish than Swedish people. Like they are they're the most surprised. But honestly, it's a big combination of things. It goes all the way back to when I was an undergrad studying macroeconomics and learning about a whole variety of things about Sweden's economy. I had a very interesting professor. But then over time, various other things. I actually was studying Norwegian for a bit while I was in Japan. So I've gone through a few things. But like there were all these different things. Like I became fascinated with deeply understanding people. So I became really interested in not just speaking a language, but like when I was in Japan, I felt like I really, really deeply understood Japanese culture, Japanese people. And it was clear that this opened up so many doors to me. And so, for example, with Swedish, the thing that's fascinating to me is that I think Swedes, as are a lot of other people from Scandinavia and Northern Europe, they're very, very good at adapting to everybody else, right? They're very good at speaking English, for example, and just adapting. And so I became so deeply curious about what's behind the curtain, you know, what makes Swedish people who they are. Like what is it about their humor or their, like, just, I became really curious. And I think to have that level of understanding, it requires a really, really advanced level of study in both language and culture. That was a tangent, but that's just an example of how over time I just developed this intrinsic motivation for studying the Swedish language. So yeah, it's different for every language, but it usually starts with a combination of intrinsic factors that just really deeply interest me. And then I have to also be kind of practical these days and think very carefully before. Chloe, hello. Mandarin Chinese. Oh my God, this is so much fun. Yeah, so yeah, these days I have to be very, very careful about adding languages. That's why I've only really added Mandarin Chinese in the last like 5 years. So I definitely think the more languages I study and speak, the more careful I have to be about adding new ones. And in terms of avoiding the temptation of other languages, at the moment, it's just it comes with practice, I think, but it's very much about practicality and just keeping myself focused on my goal. So I'm so focused on getting my current languages to very, very high levels. That's what interests me personally, right? I want to speak all of my current languages at a very, very high level over time. So I think being so focused on that goal helps me to avoid the temptation of new languages, because I'm very aware that every new language I add is going to make that goal significantly harder, especially right now when I don't have so much time. But certainly next year, I have plans that will give me a lot more time for language study. So I may Yeah, they changed that. Well, before the next question, I'll have a quick look at the chat. We've got questions like, how many languages do you know and intend to know? Mandarin Chinese is my 9th language that I believe I'll soon speak to some level of fluency. I've studied others. I used to speak Dutch, and I would say a basic level of fluency, but I haven't spoken Dutch in a very long time, so I don't count that anymore, but I would like to do it again one day. But yeah, so I guess Mandarin Chinese would be my 9th. I don't have a goal. I don't have a goal of how many. People asking about Russian. I can read Cyrillic, and I have studied some Russian, but it's not a language I currently claim to speak. Mandarin Chinese. Yeah, Mandarin Chinese is an interesting one because I adore Chinese characters. And I've also been always very, very curious about studying languages where tones are prominent. I'm very interested in pronunciation. I'm very interested in the acting component of language learning. And I have some really interesting videos and a very interesting guest coming on the channel soon to talk about the acting component. And yeah, so Chinese was on my radar for a long time, but again, I was waiting for that truly like intrinsic motivation to come along. And when I moved to San Francisco, I was surrounded by not only Chinese speakers, but also Chinese characters. There's a fantastic Chinatown in San Francisco. There's like Chinese influence everywhere I went. And that was like the last thing I needed, where I decided I want to try and learn Mandarin Chinese, and I want to try and learn it really, really well. So again, my goal with Mandarin is I really want to see if I can learn it to the point where I was with other languages. Yeah, so all right, I'll go to the next question from the Patreon supporters, and then we'll come back to the chat. Linda asks, so she says, I'm learning European Portuguese, and I'm facing some difficulties finding learning materials, especially audio content. The reason seems to be that audiobooks are not popular in Portugal. Did you face the same difficulty back when you lived in Portugal? And what's the reason you eventually decided to learn Brazilian Portuguese instead? So I lived in Portugal for a very short time. I was there for a few months, and I was working a job as a French employee. So I somehow got a job as a French person working as a French customer service agent. So like all my employment was all in French. My contract, my training, my team, everything was French. So that was a big cognitive load. And then I was earning almost no money. My income was like less than my living costs, and I was living in a very, very, very tiny, cheap place. So I quickly decided that I was going to go live in Germany. So I actually spent a lot of time in Portugal learning German, funnily enough. And I got to a basic level of, very, very basic level of fluency in German. And then I went to live in Hamburg. But while I was in Portugal, yeah, I didn't really spend much time looking for audiobooks and resources like that. Certainly what I would probably do is go to bookshops. And I've always found bookshops to be a wonderful place to practice my language skills if I'm on location. Some of my favorite memories speaking French are going to secondhand bookshops in Lyon and just like starting a conversation with the owners of bookshops, because they're so knowledgeable, they're so passionate about things like books, and I always leave with some wonderful memories, a great conversation, and lots of good books. So maybe I would try speaking to them about audiobooks and things like that. I switched to Brazilian Portuguese only really because Portuguese is the only language I started learning in the country. Normally, I always learn languages outside the country, and I'm usually already fluent to some level when I arrive. Portuguese was unplanned. It was a crazy story how I ended up living in Portugal. So to be honest, when I left Portugal, I didn't actually speak very good Portuguese. So I learned way more Portuguese after I left Portugal. And a lot of the resources I found were Brazilian Portuguese. And I just happened to make some really wonderful friends who were from Brazil. And also I found Brazilian Portuguese a lot easier as a Spanish and French and Italian speaker. Yeah, a whole variety of factors that just kind of naturally led me to Brazilian Portuguese. All right, that's that. Let's look at the chat. This is so much fun. I can't believe people are watching. Hello from Russia. Hello from Brazil. Hi, everybody. Let's see. George asks if I know that Easy German mentioned me in their podcast today. I did hear that, and I almost fell over. Yeah, I was like making my breakfast, listening to their podcast, and they talked about me, and yeah, I almost died. So just like, yeah, that was a lovely, wonderful surprise. Max, ¿cómo has estado estos días de cuarentena? Max, voy a hablar de este tema en algunos momentos, o algunos minutos. Oh my God, so many people. Okay, this is awesome. I don't know how to handle. Hey, Jared's in the chat. Hey, Jared. Many of you will know that I did a whole series with Jared on extensive reading. Oh my God, this is so cool. Okay. Oh my God. Oh, Leon lives in Hamburg. That's awesome. I love Hamburg. Hamburg is one of my favorite cities in the world. I just love it. And I absolutely adored living in Hamburg. Asian fangirl fitness. What's the hardest word you can say? Well, in my Babel lesson this morning, for some reason, they thought it was important to teach the word Aufenthaltsgenehmigung. And I had to type it like 100 times throughout the lessons. And I was like, why am I typing Aufenthaltsgenehmigung so many times? Okay, let's go to the next question. Okay, so Linda has a second question. She says, my second question is, how do you keep similar languages apart, such as Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, French? I know French, Spanish, and Portuguese and become confused all the time when I try to switch between those languages. Yeah, this is an interesting one. So I learned a lot of these languages in parallel, and a lot of people told me, don't do it. It's a bad idea. You could have permanent interference and all this stuff. And the short answer is like, I just trust my brain. And I trust the fact that as I get more and more and more advanced, this becomes less of a problem. So for me, when I was pretty low level in Italian and Spanish and Portuguese, I confused them all the time. But I knew that as I get to really high levels in those languages, I won't confuse them so much anymore. And that's exactly what happened, right? So I noticed that in the beginning, I had so many problems confusing Italian and Portuguese because they were both very low level. But Spanish, I had a lot less problem with because my Spanish was a lot better. But then once my Italian got much better, I stopped confusing it. So that's my golden rule, is I honestly don't worry too much. And I will say, I think the ability to switch between languages is a skill in itself. So I do think that you become very skilled at just switching between languages. It's almost like fitness. You develop this sort of stamina over time. Okay, that's another question down. Let's have a look at the chat. This is so much fun. Oh my God. Let's see. Hi from Turkey. Hey, Yusuf. Hey, Aldroid. Hey, Jit. Jit asks, what's your opinion on taking language courses through school? I'm so frustrated learning through classroom structure. I'm afraid to tell my professor that I want to learn independently. I'm always conflicted because I actually really enjoy being in classes. I love the feeling of being in a classroom, but it's almost like I'm not a I'm not a good person to be in the classroom because I end up just studying by myself and then getting like really far ahead. So I think if I were you, Jit, if you're frustrated, I would engage in independent study. If you're already in the class, I would say find a way to get the most value you can from the professor. So maybe that means having a conversation after the class with your professor. Maybe that means going to their office hours. I don't know, like maybe just like soak up the classroom environment for what it is if you enjoy that. Try to get as much value out of your professor as you can, but use your independent study time for making real progress. Let's see. Okay, next question from Patreon. So Toby asks about Anki. He says, how do you use it with mnemonics, including pictures? What types of words do you put in it? How prominently does it fit into your study regimen? What parameters do you use? How many words do you shoot for long term? So many questions for this invaluable tool. Thanks so much, Toby. It's funny, I go back and forth with Anki. For example, I haven't opened it in several months. I tend to primarily use Anki if I am in a consolidation phase. So for me, I go through these phases where I do a ton of input, which means both like listening and reading, but it also just means learning lots of words. And occasionally I get to a saturation point where, you know, I can tell that I've really filled my sort of like short, medium term memory. And so I'll go through a consolidation phase. And so sometimes I'll use Anki as like a tool to kind of like strengthen that and really, you know, really nail down certain phrases, certain things that I feel like I need a boost. But I don't use Anki all the time. So honestly, my Anki setup when I use it is very simple. I don't tend to use a lot of mnemonics or pictures. But I will say I never put single words in. I almost never study individual words. I always talk about this, right? I tend to put entire phrases. And of course, if I can have audio, it's really helpful. So I did make a Chinese pod deck where on Chinese pod, they actually let you download every single audio file. So I just like drag and dropped, put them in there. But yeah, that's kind of how I use Anki. I use it sparingly. I don't use it all the time. I only use it when I really feel like I need it for something in particular, which is often either consolidation or things like that. Hi, everybody in the chat. We have questions about ASML. Well, we have questions about Urdu. A couple people have asked about, have I thought about learning Urdu? I've not. I'm going to try to be delicate with this response. Please forgive me if I blunder any cultural, societal, or political issues. I definitely do not intend to. I will say I've studied Hindi in the past, and because I love all kinds of food from that entire part of the world, and so as a true British person, I've eaten a lot of Indian food. So I used to go to a restaurant that was actually owned by a Nepali family, well, a family from Nepal, but they spoke Hindi a lot in the restaurant. So every time I went there, they would teach me a phrase in Hindi, and over time I actually became somewhat conversational. It was quite interesting. So but I haven't studied Hindi for a long time now. But Urdu specifically, I've never learned, never studied. But I do really enjoy. I enjoy a lot of things from that part of the world in general. For example, like I've really enjoyed getting to know people from Nepal, just as one example. And of course, through that, I've been curious about learning Nepali, for example. And I have some wonderful friends in the UK who speak Bengali, and I was like, oh my God, that would be so fun. But again, it's tricky to be practical. Okay, I'm so bad at this. All right, back to Patreon questions. So Joel Trust asks, I'm starting my journey learning Esperanto and Spanish, but I find it hard to retain anything. I feel like my Anki lessons are just a repeat of the day before, LOL. Does anyone else pronounce that lol? I've always, in my head, when I read it as lol. But I don't know if anyone else does that. So I'm going to stick to the status quo, LOL. Any tips for someone starting a new language to make memorizing words and phrases stick, especially if the target words don't look or sound anything like your native language? Any thanks, Joel Trask. So, yeah, so for me, when I'm having, so one thing to note, when you're a beginner in a language, things take a lot longer to stick. They just do, right? So when I was a beginner in Mandarin Chinese, not that long ago, it's like every word I learned, it would just disappear. It's incredible. So one thing I'll tell you is hang tight, don't worry. As you get a stronger foundation for the language, you will find that it becomes a lot easier to learn new words and new things in general, and they will stick a lot more easily. Second thing is that, so what I will say the best thing for me has been seeing a word in context, but especially seeing a word in multiple contexts. So the first thing is, if you're studying vocabulary in isolation and you're a beginner, it's going to be really difficult. So in my opinion, that's the first thing you can do. Make sure you're studying words at least in a sentence, like where there's some context around the word. But the best thing is when you see the same word in multiple contexts. Now, that will happen naturally as you study lots of resources, but you can manufacture it. So if you're a beginner and you're struggling along and you really want those basic words to stick, you could use like a context dictionary. Maybe somebody, if any of you have some of those on hand, maybe you can post links in the chat. But yeah, you could use a context dictionary, and then you could actually pull, a bunch of sentences that are meaningful to you and that use those keywords you're trying to learn. So yeah, that's that. I hope that's helpful. Okay, back to the chat. Let's see. Yes, I've used Asimil a whole bunch. Not so much these days, but I still like Asimil. Any tips for discovering podcasts? Honestly, what I do these days is I tend to Google podcasts in German or like Mandarin Chinese podcasts, and you'll find very often articles where they just list out like 10 podcasts that everyone should listen to in Swedish, and then they'll have them based on level. But that's not always possible, but I'm finding that that's getting more and more abundant, that type of content. Not always easy. Let's see. Oh my God, this is so fun. I love it. Okay. What's your favorite language and your favorite word? Favorite language is impossible. That I really do love. I love all of my languages equally, but in very different ways. The one word I love in Swedish is smultronställe, which is like, well, this idea of smultron and then something. So the root of that, as far as my understanding, is that smultron is like a wild strawberry, which again, I've never been to Sweden, and I've still never spoken Swedish with a person, and I'm looking forward to making content about that soon. But so my understanding is that wild strawberries are very near and dear to Swedish people's hearts. So smultronställe is like my wild strawberry place, i.e. my favorite place. And you can combine it with a lot of different words. Japanese has so many words that I wish existed in every language. For example, I always want to say sasuga in Japanese. If anyone speaks Japanese in the comments, you'll know what I mean. Also, like otsukare sama. Like I always want to say otsukare, like to my friends. In Japan, I used to have a lot of jokes with my friends. They would say otsukare, and I would say tsukarechatta, which is kind of a joke. Yeah, so many words from so many languages. Let's see. Okay, I will go back to the Patreon questions. Okay, so here we go. This one is gonna get interesting. So Sylvain says, you already answered so many of my language-related questions, so let's get personal. I would love to get to know you more. So for the curious people out there, could you share some personal information with us? While I'm doing this, feel free to ask personal questions in the comment, in the chat right now. I will happen to, I'll try to answer, let's use this as a chance. I'm happy to answer personal questions. Obviously, if anything is, if I don't want to answer something, I'll just tell you. But Sylvain says they want to know my age, what are my other sources of joy besides language, and coffee. Oh, coffee was going to be a big one. Okay, so I'm 29. I turned 29 just a few months ago. I have a lot of joys outside of language learning and coffee. Sounds kind of cheesy, but honestly, one of them is just learning. I really can't describe how much joy I get from learning stuff. Like, for example, I recently got incredibly interested in encryption and ciphers specifically, if anyone knows what ciphers are. And so it's just fascinating. Like let me go grab a book for you real quick. Hang on. Let's see. So, okay. For example, I have a book here about cracking codes with Python. And the very first sentence in the book says, let's see. If you could travel back to the early 1990s with this book, the contents of chapter 23 that implement part of the RSA cipher would be illegal to export out of the United States because messages encrypted with RSA are impossible to hack. The export of encryption software like that was deemed a matter of national security and required State Department approval. In fact, strong cryptography was regulated at the same level as tanks, missiles, and flamethrowers. I find that so fascinating, and I adore learning about like the history of cryptography, learning how to actually write ciphers, how to break them. That's just one super random topic, but I can't tell you how much I just love learning. But that's a silly answer probably. I also love woodworking. I'm a massive design geek. I adore design. Let me show you something. This is kind of embarrassing. So this book is about typography. This book is about typography. This is about typography. This massive book is about typography. Typography, design, information architecture, typography. Typography. I have an enormous amount of books about design and typography. I have so many things make me happy outside of language learning. Let's see. Let me look at the chat. Do we have any personal questions? Are you an American? I couldn't get your accent. Yes. So I think the most interesting thing about me seems to be my accent. Everybody asks about it. I've had maybe 1,000 people ask me in the comments, where are you from? What is going on? Some people get really detailed. I've had the most fascinating analysis of my accent. People just trying to figure it out. I am not American. I am from the UK. My accent is a very interesting story, but the short version is that I like to play with my accent. So I actually, my first 3 months at my first job in San Francisco, nobody knew I was not from the US. And I was literally acting the entire 3 months. And I wanted to see if I could fool people. Because for me, I spent a long time living in different countries where speaking the language was a daily challenge and it was really fun. So when I'm living in English-speaking countries, the way I keep it interesting is I play with my accent. And so I've never admitted this before, but the reason why so many of you have been baffled and confused by my accent is because I'm basically experimenting and having fun with my accent. I'm really sorry. It's terrible. But yeah, so sometimes I go to the coffee shop and I decide I'm going to try and be a New Yorker for the whole morning. And I'm going to try and see if people can figure it out. So Sylvain also wanted to know my favorite foods. I have a lot. It's difficult to pick one. But Sylvain said a bunch of really nice things. Oh, thank you, Sylvain. Any more personal questions before we move on? Sirap wants to know my favorite type of sandwich. Oh God, that's a really hard one. So many good. I love a good croque monsieur, and I love even more a croque madame, because I love basically putting an egg on anything. Like if you give me a soft boiled egg, just put it on anything. I love it. Like for example, if you give me like tonkatsu, like Japanese, or like chicken katsu over white rice with an egg. Oh, so I love a croque madame because it's a croque monsieur with an egg. Great. Let's see. Any other personal questions? Sign language, yes, I would like to. My favorite book in German. So I've already chosen my first novel in German. Please don't fall over. Okay, so I'm going to be reading Ein ganzes Leben by Robert Seethaler. That's going to be my first ever novel in German. I always do this. I actually have novels in Finnish. I have about 4 novels in Finnish. I have a book in Icelandic. I always pick my first novel. In Swedish, oh my God. In Swedish, I have this. I've shown it before. Män som hatar kvinnor, which is the girl with a dragon tattoo in the original Swedish language. So I got this a long time ago, even though it's going to be a while before I read it. Someone asked if I'm married. No, I'm not married. And I am single. I don't have a partner. Okay, let me just scroll through any other personal questions before I move on. My MBTI is very complicated, and I think I should probably take it again. I think I was an INFP last time I took it. Favorite coffee brand and type. I love Andy Town. I have a lot of favorites. This mug comes from a place called Sight Glass in San Francisco, but Andy Town is probably my favorite right now. Catherine is curious about what my North American accents sound like. It's going to be hard to do it now, but I may slip into it later. See what happens. Hey, Matheus. Daz wants to know where in the UK I'm from. I am from a massive village called Kings Bromley. It's not massive. No one knows it. But my home city is Lichfield. Yeah, I love it. It's a beautiful, gorgeous little... It's a city because it has a cathedral. Mateus wants to know how my Swedish is. It's okay. It's a bit rusty right now. Yeah, I could try, speak a little bit if you want. Okay, I'll go back to Patreon questions for a minute, and I'll keep looking back. So Nat asks, so Nat is a year into learning Mandarin and says, I'm reaching the point where I want to start finding language partners to have conversations with. I feel like I'm missing some of the kinds of vocab and practice questions that would help me get the most out of doing that. Especially if I end up in a language exchange with someone hoping to learn English while I learn Mandarin. I lack experience on how to most effectively make the transition towards talking to others. You've previously given the excellent question, what's a natural way to say X or Y? But what would you say are other practice questions and expectations for responses someone would need in their language toolbox before starting conversations with a native speaker who they'll only be talking to in your target language? Do you have any advice for starting a language exchange, or what point you should get the most out of doing this? Any tips on how to ensure the practice questions make sense to your partner? Okay, especially that Google Translate is bad at Asian languages. Okay, I'll try to, let's see. Okay. So I would honestly really recommend the podcast interview method that I talked about recently. I would recommend trying to actually simulate meaningful conversations. This is one thing. Not everyone likes doing this, but this is one thing I would personally do is, try to think, like, one thing that works really well is practice talking about yourself, right? Very often people want to know your story. When I was in Japan, I actually got so good at telling people where I'm from, why I'm learning Japanese, how I learn Japanese, that I actually started to say it too quickly because I practiced it so much because everybody would ask me the same questions. So after a while, Japanese people were like, can you slow down? Can you speak a bit more slowly? I'm having trouble understanding. So I realized, like, wow, it's become so automatic because it's the same questions that you often get. So I would say, practicing, like, telling your story and basic questions about yourself, your life experiences. And one thing that's really nice is it's nice to get other people talking. So I honestly think if you can, practice asking people about themselves, and if you can practice, like, simple things like, tell things like saying that you didn't quite catch that, can you say it again? Could you repeat this? I'm not really sure. I really think that if you get your listening comprehension to a point where you can follow like a basic podcast, like if you can kind of just about follow along, and then I think you'll be fine. I think you'll be able to understand enough to at least get the gist in that conversation. One-on-one conversations tend to be a lot easier than listening to, like, multiple people speaking. So yeah, I just think if you can practice those questions that will get somebody talking, right? You don't need to understand everything they say. If you can follow the gist, and then you can understand when they say, what about you? And then, just come prepared with the ability to talk about yourself, talk about your experiences. I think that's my advice there. But I would say, for me personally, I get very anxious about talking to people if I don't feel confident that I will be able to keep up on the comprehension side. So I think, getting to a point where you can follow a basic conversation pretty well, I think that's going to be important. Let's see. Okay, I'm looking at the chat. Someone asked what I do for a living. So it's interesting. I am a software engineer. I did briefly make a transition over to data science, and I was planning on actually working as a data scientist for the remainder of my time here in the Bay Area before I go full-time on my own projects. But I'm now actually back sort of doing software engineering full time, which I probably will do until I end up going full time on stuff. Oh my God. Let's see. Cyrus asks, is it useful to write kanji or is it enough to memorize the characters? Personally, I love kanji. I love Chinese characters in general, and I have found it to be very, very helpful to write characters. It's a bit of a contentious issue, but I have taught a lot of people Japanese, a lot. Japanese is the language that I taught the most, probably, when I was teaching full time. And I have seen students that refused to write by hand. And I've seen students that wrote a lot by hand. Every time, the people that did a lot of writing, I feel like they advanced so much more quickly with regards to becoming comfortable with kanji, comfortable reading in Japanese. That's just my experience and my experience teaching people. I do feel like it is useful. Yeah, even if you don't write every character, but it is useful to understand the anatomy of Chinese characters really well and to develop an eye for recognizing very subtle differences. And I find that at least doing a lot of handwriting, at some point, you get really good at quick recognition of characters, and especially characters that are quite similar. Let's see. Hey, everyone. Let's see. Okay, I'm really bad at managing this chat. People are asking for my New York accent now. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to go back to Patreon questions. My favorite sport sound more like Northern Ireland or Scotland. My dad is from Scotland, and I grew up hearing a very colorful set of vocabulary from my dad. He's from Glasgow, and he is extremely good at swearing in very creative ways. And so I grew up hearing a lot of pretty amazing turns of phrase. Honestly, the Scottish accent is one of my favorite accents. Okay, back to Patreon questions. Tom says, I remember you saying that you would build a content library as you found more materials that you would use as you further progress in the language. So then, two things. What are your criteria for adding something into your dedicated content library? Number two, how do you determine if it's a better material for learning intensively or extensively with? Let's see. So yeah, as I showed, right, one thing I do is I collect books, right? So I do that because it's very motivating, and also it's very practical because once I reach a level where I can start reading books, I have things. But in terms of what goes into my content library, the basic criteria is, do I love this? And do I feel strongly that I'm going to want to see this again? Basically, that's it. Like, so for example, Easy German, I've talked about that a lot. So in the past, I studied about 10 episodes of the Easy German YouTube series really intensively. So I learned like every single word, phrase, idiom, pattern, sentence structure. It was so helpful. And I knew that I'm going to want to come back to this one day because this is solid gold. So I kept that. And now that I'm back to German, I'm so glad I kept it because now I've already done all that work. I spent so many hours making those resources, taking those notes, and it's all still there for me. So my main criteria for adding something is, do I love this? Do I love this? And am I going to want to see this again? And then that's how and then in terms of extensive or intensive, it depends on my level. And like what I want from it. So I believe extensive reading is excellent. I also believe intensive reading is excellent. And I think they are two different tools. That's my personal take. So I will read extensively more now, thanks to my amazing conversation with Jared. Now that I understand extensive reading better than I did before. But I'm going to do extensive reading primarily for things like building fluency, building automatic processing power. I'm going to be, doing that to reinforce vocabulary. But intensive reading for me is a different tool. It's amazing for discovery. It's amazing for like being a detective and like devouring content. It's a completely different experience. And also intensive reading has this amazing component of struggling that you don't get so much with extensive reading. And so personally, I believe these are both important tools. So so it kind of depends on what I'm looking for and what my level is. So with podcasts, right now I'm doing both. I study them intensively part of the time, and that gives me the ability to rip them to shreds, and it increases my language skill exponentially. It's amazing. But it's still also important to get that extensive listening practice. So I also do that. So sometimes I use the same resource and I do both types of study. All right, back to the chat. This is so much fun. I can't believe you guys are watching. I really love it. Have I read any good novels in Swedish? So I started reading a book called En man som heter Ove, I believe is the name. I read about 1/4 of that, but this is a while back. I haven't honestly been able to study Swedish much at all for a few years. For those of you who don't know, I've been investing like 90% of my, well, it's kind of weird. At least like 60% of all my free time in my life, the last 3 years, I've been building a website called Journaly, which, oh my God, should I give you an update? Okay, I have a very exciting update about Journaly. I'm not really supposed to say it, but let me know in the chat if you want it. It's really exciting. But yeah, so between Journaly and building my YouTube channel, making videos, all these things, I've basically sacrificed like 95% of my language learning time. But I've done that because I'm trying to build a life where language learning can suddenly become a massive part of my daily life again. And I'm almost there, basically thanks to all of you. So I will be getting back to Swedish very soon, and I'm very excited. Someone asked if I've tried reading a tech book in a different language. Was there value in it? I've done some stuff like that. I used to read woodworking books in Japanese, and that was pretty cool. I've designed things that I wanted to build, and all the measurements everything's in Japanese in the designs. And I used to have a special technique for note-taking in university where I would actually listen in English, and in real time, I would take my notes in Japanese. It was incredible. It was extremely difficult in the beginning, but I got really good at it. So I actually would take all my notes for my classes in Japanese, and I would have my dictionary open. I got permission from my teachers to say, hey, I'm not texting. I need my dictionary because I'm taking notes in Japanese. It was useful. I think nowadays, I don't do it as much. Nowadays, it depends on what my proficiency. So would I read books about cryptography in French, for example? Hell yeah. If I have the time, I'll do it. But right now, I don't have the time. And so I read those books in English because it's so much faster. And my main goal right now, reading about cryptography, is I want to improve my knowledge of, software security and all kinds of stuff like that. But in the future, I will do that. Okay, back to Patreon. Okay, Trisha, we have a few more personal questions. Trisha wants to know, what's my morning routine like specifically? And she also says, you really iron? I haven't touched an iron for years. Again, I don't know why everyone is so surprised that I iron my clothes. When I got my first job in San Francisco, I remember at lunchtime, I mentioned in passing that I'd been ironing my clothes, the whole table went silent. And like the CTO of that company was like, "You iron your clothes?" And I was just like, why is this so weird? Why is everyone so surprised? Yes, I do iron my clothes. My morning routine. So at the moment, it changes more than it used to because I have so many priorities I'm juggling. But basically, I wake up at 5:15. I started sleeping in 15 more minutes. And I get ready. And my first thing I do is I clean my espresso machine. I make a cup of coffee. Well, I start heating it up, getting it ready. Once I'm ready for the day, my hair is becoming quite demanding, which is kind of funny. I don't actually do anything. My hair, I don't put any product in it, but it's so crazy in the morning that I like, it's so stupid. I like literally put my head in the shower so I can get it wet. And then that way I can like control it and I let it dry. But yeah, so I do all that. And yeah, basically I make a cup of coffee, make breakfast, and I study German. So right now, German is my morning language. Study German for a bit. And then the rest of the morning, I work on either YouTube videos, I work on Journaly. Yeah, it's a bit crazy. Yeah, I would much prefer to have a stricter morning routine, but right now it's really difficult to do that. And Trisha also wants to know, how has COVID been impacting me? Do I still go to coffee shops in the morning? Am I working from home? Did I get my flu shot? She works in a hospital. Yeah, COVID has definitely impacted me pretty heavily, but certainly not as much as some people. For example, I still have my job, which I'm incredibly grateful for. That in itself, I haven't lost any family members or friends, thankfully. But yeah, COVID hit me pretty hard because I moved into this apartment literally the day before lockdown, and I had no furniture. All my furniture got stuck on some truck, and they said they had canceled all deliveries until after lockdowns. So I was working from home in a completely empty apartment with like 2 bar stools. That's all I had. So it was pretty rough. And also I was doing daily language diary videos on YouTube. And I also was asked to lead a massive software project at my job with an extremely tight deadline during the first month of COVID. So it was extremely stressful. And I actually spent 3.5 months with no furniture, just in an empty studio apartment. So it was pretty tough. Where I live, everything is still, we can't go inside places. So I know a lot of places have like opened back up. I see people on Instagram going inside of restaurants, living different degrees of normal. But where I live, nothing has changed. So you still can't go inside any restaurants. You can't go inside any coffee shops. I haven't been inside a single place except the supermarket. And I have seen one person this whole time. My dear friend Chloe, who at one point was in the chat today. She is like the one person I've really seen the entire time. So yeah, it's been pretty crazy. But I have to say, I'm staying super positive. So many good things are happening with YouTube, with my Patreon, with Journaly. So I'm really just focusing on all those positive things. And I'm trying my best to spread my positivity and my energy, and staying grateful for that. Someone asked if my parents spoke different languages at home growing up. No, no. So my dad is from Scotland. My mother is from Iraq. But I did not learn any Arabic growing up at all. And my mother no longer speaks Arabic. She hasn't really spoken it in I think, over 30 years now. So I grew up speaking one language, and I was absolutely terrible at learning languages in school. Yeah. Okay, back to Patreon. Let's see. Oh, well, okay, one more. Danny asks, how many countries have I lived in? I have lived in, I think it's 9. I lived in, so obviously the UK, USA, Japan, Germany, Portugal, Netherlands, and I lived, Spain. So we have 7, Canada, 8. And then like I moved to Finland, but I didn't live there at all. Like I moved there and I was going to take a job, but I actually had a personal breakdown. That was the probably the hardest time in my life. And I just couldn't do it. But I did also live in Italy. So I think that's 9 countries I've lived in. But a lot of those were very short times. Okay, we're almost done with the Patreon questions. Oh my God, been in 1 hour. This is so cool. So Amy says, I'm wondering what you think of shadowing. Is this an effective method for language learning? If so, how would you go about doing it? So I'm going to do a whole video on shadowing soon, but I will say that I actually have a very detailed approach to shadowing. Many people, they just discuss shadowing as like a 1-layer approach, right? So you listen to something and then you copy it right after. So I wonder if I could show you. Shall I try to, do you want to see some shadowing in real time? This is gonna, I'm not sure if I can do it. So I have done shadowing so extensively that I could probably pull up a Japanese podcast drama that I haven't even listened to for several years. I could probably still shadow it right now, live. Do you guys want to see that? Let me know if you want to see me do it. Okay, we already have a few people saying yes. Let me see if I can find it. Yeah, okay. So this is a Japanese podcast drama that I adore. And so many people, what they do is all they do is they say, listen, and then repeat what they say. So, Tamahomu presents 300秒ドラママイドリーム大作戦第1話女の作戦開始編 So like that's all they do, right? But this, to me, that's step 1. That's step 1. So what I do is the first time through, I start mumbling, right? So let's do this. Let's have fun. So we're going to listen to a real, like it's a natural speed dialogue between 2 characters, right?
ねえ、ひろき、週末ちょっと行きたいとこあるんだけど。はいはい。山？映画？どこでもどうぞ。そんな。
So in the beginning, I mumble. So I'm listening to it over and over again, and I'm mumbling along, trying to get comfortable with the words. I progress to where I'm copying it. So that would be like this. Okay. Listen carefully. ねえ、ひろき、週末、ちょっと行きたいところあるんだけど。はいはい。山？映画？どこでもどうぞ。その日のお楽しみ。私も初めてなの。Right, so you see, here, all I'm really doing is copying, right? I'm trying to copy. That's what most people do, and that's it. They stop there. But you're missing the most powerful thing of shadowing. What I want to do is gradually build up to where I'm shadowing everything from the rhythm, intonation, ups and downs, emotion, voice, right? So now I'm going to try and do it. I haven't listened to this in like 3 years, so please forgive me if I get it wrong. いや、かなり焦っていた。なんとしてでも、決めておきたい。なんとしても。Right? Now listen to this. ねえ、ひろき、週末ちょっと行きたいとこあるんだけど、はいはい、山映画どこでもどうぞ。その次の楽しみ。
私も初めてなの。
Right? Here. Hang on. 初めて. Right. So the point is, here, I'm not just saying like, I'm not just shadowing the words. I'm saying like, 初めて? Like, I'm copying everything. If she's sad, I'm sad. If he's happy, I'm happy. That is the pinnacle of shadowing to me. And that is where it gets powerful. So, sorry, that was super random. I did not plan that. But, you know, that's Japanese. I'm not studying Japanese right now. I haven't listened to that in so many years, but I can still shadow it almost perfectly because I did it so deeply. Lotic says you should do a live stream where people can call in and start a conversation in an unexpected language of their choice. I'm actually planning on doing that next year. Once I can get back to my languages and really get on top of stuff, I'm happy to do totally spontaneous like conversations in different languages. Okay, so that's all the questions from my Patreon supporters. So I mean, just about 1 hour. I did not realize it would be so long. I'm so sorry if I've missed anything. I've tried my best to stay up with the chat. Before we go, does anyone have any last questions? Pimsleur versus Duolingo. Personally, again, they're so different. I like Pimsleur for... Sorry, we have some really interesting comments in the chat. Apparently, people like my Japanese shadowing demo. I use Pimsleur sometimes in the beginning when I'm trying to get a feel for the language. I recently did the entire Pimsleur series for Chinese. I did it level 1 through 5 because I'm going to do a review. I found the first few levels really helpful. After that, I found it not helpful. So I like Pimsleur because I can do it while I'm walking, washing the dishes, dead time. But I just do it to a certain point. And Duolingo, I've never been a huge fan of Duolingo. I would like to try it again because I know that they've improved it, I think. So I want to stay up to date. But I used Duolingo a lot in the past, like a long time ago. And I always found that my retention was quite bad. So, yeah, I guess... am I a Harry Potter fan? I enjoy Harry Potter. I would like to potentially read the books in different languages in the future. When I was a kid, I did not enjoy reading, so I didn't read the books. But now I love reading. So, okay. What's your take on? Yeah. Okay. There's so many good questions. I think we're at 1 hour and 8 minutes, so I think we may have to end this here. However, okay, Joancho asks, how did you get into software? I'll answer this last question. Oh no, wait, hang on. Did you guys want to know about journaling? Okay, anyone who's still here, this is a secret update, because I think most people are not going to watch this for 1 hour, 8 minutes. Journaling is going into beta tomorrow. So for all of you who have been waiting for a long time, for all of you on the waiting list, for all of you that have been dying for updates, it's going in tomorrow. It's actually been in alpha testing for 3 months. So we've had 3 people. We've had about 15 to 20 people testing the alpha version for 3 months, and it has completely transformed. Like the last time you saw Journaly in my videos, it is so much better. It's absolutely spectacular. I just love it. Let me be really geeky for a second. So we have a feature now where, you know, you can leave comments all over somebody's post. You can open a comment thread, have a whole discussion. But now when you edit the post, we actually built a system where as soon as you click save, we create a diff. It's called a diff. So basically, we analyze every single change you made. We analyze the previous version with the new version. We take the position of every single comment thread, and we basically perform. We have an algorithm we wrote that analyzes, can we still show the comment thread in the post? So if we can, then we actually update the highlight so that it matches. So you can still see the original comment thread and you can see how it's changed. And we also, if you delete a paragraph or if you change it too much where we can't show it anymore, we actually still capture it and we show outdated comments down below. So you can still go back and see all the comments that were left. It's fantastic. I'm so excited. This is the biggest project of my whole life. Yeah, I'm so excited. So everybody on the wait list, you'll be getting an email from me tomorrow. And I'm not going to talk about this publicly, except for on a live stream. But yeah, I'm not going to talk about it publicly for a few weeks. We're going to see how the app does with 600 people. 600 people on the wait list. And then, yeah, once everything looks good, once we see that everything's working, then we'll release it to the world. So yeah, it is a beta. So there are still a few things that we're building. So please be patient. But oh my God, I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. Okay, everybody, I'm going to go. I love you all. I really mean it. And by the way, thank you for letting me talk about coffee so much in videos. I really love it when people notice that I forget to drink my coffee sometimes. I love it. So the name of the app is Journally. So it's at journally.io. So that's where you can sign up for the waiting list. And tomorrow, everybody is going to get an email with a link inviting you to sign up. I can't wait. By the way, there are already over 100 posts on Journally. We have like 120 posts in so many languages. I love it. All right, everybody. Goodbye. Again, thank you so much. I'm sending a big hug. Oh, it was so much fun. Please feel free to write in and let me know if we should do more of these live streams. Okay. Bye, everyone. Take care.